Centralization 비례배지가요. 아직 아까운데.
There was a period of time here in Waikagama where there was 7 families, at the very end of centralization. There was 7 families were left, including us. We were in Eskasoni. And these people that were left behind, I could almost tell you who they were. The Grand Chief didn't go anywhere. There was a church. I don't ever recall ever being, torn down or, the church was always there. And there was always service. This is what used to happen. The priests, that come there, sometimes they couldn't make it. And there was prayers every Sunday in the church by the elders, like John Sam. John Sam was the man I was trying to remember. He knew all the songs, in Mi'kmaq, all the choir. There was a choir here. And the community used to have church without a priest, for the longest time until they had it was when I came on the scene there to live in Waikagama. My parents lived in Waikagama, that they had Father John Angus Rankin, came, to this community. And we had church, that was, sort of, steady every Sunday. And if there wasn't a priest around, the men, would do the service themselves. They wouldn't do all the things, they'd say rosaries and, like they'd sing, like native songs. And so, and this priest was here on this reserve for 35 years. He was very, he was very well liked, and he did an awful pile of work. When he started, he was involved in the community, and he had all kinds of things going on. And then they started fixing the church, and people started going to church, and finally, we got a priest that finally, was here for 35 years. And, that's where the community, I think, grew a lot, during those years, because this guy was very aggressive, this priest, the community worker. And he had these guys, like working and, like they're getting grants and everything. The hall, was one of the, got built, and it burnt down just this year. And now they built another one. Our hall is right across from where I live with the house. And, they had schools built here a couple of times, since that time, and now, they have a brand new school, that's here in Waikagama. And when you really look at the fact that in 1960 there were 6 families here, and you look at it now, there's 1,000 people here. So it's a real progress has been made. That's why, we started right from the beginning all over again. Our community was, through the government, that program, was completely wiped out, through that policy. And I think too, you could say that when you come to think of the people, from Waikagama that used to live here, they never saw an Indian agent or anything like that before. They were self-sufficient. When you look down the road here in Waikagama, there's beautiful lands, that are they're still there, right? And they had, like gardens, and the people were very self-sufficient, and that's why, like, I guess even today, like their ancestors, or their kids that are around here, they're aggressive and, like people, that like to, sort of look out for themselves. Mostly my mother, started making baskets Actually, her family in Chapel Island, were very aggressive people as well. Her father was a fisherman, and her mother, she was not a native. My grandmother was not a native. There's a story. I guess you'd hear stories about children that were in years ago. That if non-natives didn't want, to raise, their children who were illegitimate, usually, went to the reserve and asked the families on the reserve, in the native community if they wanted to have this child, and a lot of them took children in, from the white community. And my grandmother was one of those women. She was quite young when she was adopted by a native family from Prince Edward Island, and I guess brought over by a group of people who came to visit from Cape Breton Island, and they were given this child, that's my grandmother, and they took her home to Eskasoni. Not Eskasoni, Waikagama. And she ended up in Eskasoni, and her story is really a great story. She had 10 children herself, like with my grandfather, and they lived in Chapel Island all their lives. They didn't move either. Yes, they did. They moved to Eskasoni during this centralization. They've always made baskets for sale. That was, there was nothing else, like there was no other jobs, that were going on. And they did, start making baskets, and basketry was going on already in those years, in a lot of reserves in Nova Scotia. I guess basically, at first they used to sell baskets, in the houses, around Cape Breton, and sometimes, they'd go to mainland and some of these communities there, and they'd sell them house to house, and that's how she really got started. And then both of them at this time, somewhere in before Father Rankin came on the scene, before 1960. They started a basket shop on the highway, and she ran that business, for 13 years until she got sick. She got sick and had to quit her job, and she had to sell the place, and she was, in her late 50s by that time, and then when she quit her job, like with the store and, whatever she was doing before. When she started again, she sort of went on her own. She started making baskets in her own home. And my dad had a great influence on her because he was a very, what you would call a very efficient carpenter, and he perfectionist. And he was supervising her all the time. He said, don't make baskets for selling. Make the best basket you can make. And even if you have to rip it out 100 times, he said, don't put anything on the market that's a mess. Waikagama is a sort of an English, I guess, way of saying, Waikagama. Waikagama, it's not really, when they want to translate it into Mi'kmaq, the way it's supposed to be, that's the way we remember it, that are older, and, our parents, are older. It's the real translation of Waikagama is Wegomach. Sometimes, when people, who are not familiar in the language, they could make up their own sounds, or, but it's not, when elders hear that, it's not the way it's supposed to go at all. Wegoma Elie Sabono. I said, I'm going to Waikagama tomorrow. Up that river, there is a swimming hole. And children have been going there for years, for a long time. Even today, they still go there up that river. And, like they didn't really, they just swam. I don't think, they fished the river, didn't they? Mm-hmm. For sometimes, they got trout or salmon were coming up that river over the years, but it wasn't really anything heavy. They had great respect for the land, our people. Great respect. It's not something they get excited about, you just look after it, and kids were taught, how to, look after, the land and respect the land, I guess is more than the best word you could use. And that's why I'm really, really happy, to see, the young people today, getting involved. We were up there, I had never been up there in my life, it's the first time I was up there. I was very impressed, with what they were doing. And I think, I hope something good comes out of it, down the road, that there'd be, further development, of this idea, that they're doing right now, because you said we're not doing enough of things like that. We're the first community in Cape Breton Island, when the tourists come to this country, the first people they meet, and they met, like 500 years ago or how many years ago they were there, were the Mi'kmaq. And we've done nothing about showing off our culture and our language and, telling, the tourists, exactly, how important we are. And how important we are to the world, that after 10,000 years, we still speak our language. And we practice our culture, and we've lost a lot of it, mind you, but it's coming back, it's coming back, and it's something that children should be proud of. And every effort should be made on the part of parents or communities, to try to bring these to the surface and let people know about how great we are. We have proof.
Đó là cái gì đó bây giờ đó, chúng ta đọc sơ